Hello and welcome to my channel everybody. So a little while ago I made a book with geeky book recommendations, and pretty much ever since making this video I was slightly annoyed with myself that I hadn't really realised that literally every single one of the books I recommended was by a male author or a male scientist, which is fair enough. But as a female scientist myself, I kind of felt that it would be good to also have some of that female representation in science. And so I decided to make a video dedicated entirely to books about female scientists. And so the first book that I want to mention in this recommendation video is The Thrilling Adventures of Lovelace and Babbage, the mostly true story of the first computer. Whoops, that's my bookmark falling out. And so it follows the story of Ada Lovelace as well as Babbage, though I can't remember his first name, who were developing the differencing machine, or rather they were coming up with the idea of the differencing machine, which later on was very, very important and influential in actually coming out with the first calculators and first computers. And it is written in a really, really fascinating way because not only is it a graphic novel with Ada Lovelace's story in there, it also is full of footnotes and little kind of background stories, and it is absolutely fascinating. I haven't actually finished it yet, but it's so interesting. It's kind of a little bit, I don't want to say difficult to read, but it's just because it has so many levels of information in there. It's really, really fascinating, and I just love how it deals with the history of this really, really important woman. Next up there is a book called Forgotten Women, the Scientists. And it says, Forgotten Women is a brand new series which will uncover the lost histories of women who, over thousands of years, have refused to accept the hand they were dealt and have changed the course of our futures forever. Forgotten Women, the Scientists celebrates 48 unsung scientific heroes whose hugely important yet broadly unacknowledged discoveries have transformed our understanding of the scientific world around us, such as Mary Anning, the amateur paleontologist whose fossil findings changed scientific thinking about the Earth's history, and Immortal, who has been dubbed the mighty mathematician you've never heard of. So I really recommend this one as well as the next one if you just want to dip into some of the stories of the female scientists that you might not have heard about in school, because it gives you kind of glimpses at who they are and what their stories are. Maybe then you might find someone that you want to learn more about. And this next one is one that I actually got during my trip to Stockholm last year, and my mum gave it to me. We bought it actually in the Nobel Museum, and it is Women in Science, 50 Fearless Pioneers Who Changed the World. And it is an absolutely beautiful book. I mean, just look at this cover. I love the illustration in here. And so it basically has a bunch of beautifully illustrated stories of 50 female scientists. And it says, it's a scientific fact, women rock. A charmingly illustrated and educational book, Women in Science highlights the contributions of 50 notable women to the field of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, from the ancient to the modern world. Full of striking singular art, this fascinating collection also contains infographics about relevant topics such as lab equipment, rates of women currently working in STEM fields, and an illustrated scientific glossary. The trailblazing women profiled include well-known figures like primatologist Jane Goodall, as well as lesser-known pioneers such as Katherine Johnson, the African-American physicist and mathematician who calculated the trajectory of the 1969 Apollo 11 mission to the moon. Women in Science celebrates the achievements of the intrepid women who have paved the way for the next generation of female engineers, biologists, mathematicians, doctors, astronauts, physicists, and more. And so this book also reminded me that I should make absolutely sure to mention Hidden Figures, which I unfortunately don't have as a physical copy yet. And it follows the story of these calculators who were women working for NASA who, as Katherine Johnson, for example, calculated the trajectory of the Apollo mission and other missions that actually got us to the moon. And it is both a really interesting story of what it was like to be a female scientist in the 60s, but also in particular that story about racism and how racism has also obviously shaped these women. And it is a beautiful story of the intersectionality of being a female scientist who, in, for example, Katherine Johnson's case, was also a black female scientist, which meant that she faced even more prejudice and obstacles and hurdles that she had to overcome. But it is a truly inspiring story, and if you don't have time to read the book, maybe definitely go check out that film because it is amazing. And lastly, I want to mention another book about a black female who might not have been a scientist herself, but whose life and death, unfortunately, actually had a huge impact on the evolution of science. And it is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And so the blurb for this one says, her name was Henrietta Lacks, but scientists know her as Hela. She was a poor southern tobacco farmer who worked the same land as her slave ancestors, yet her cells, taken without her knowledge, and consent I might add, became one of the most important tools in medicine. The first immortal human cells grown in culture, they are still alive today, though she has been dead for more than 60 years. If you could pile all of Hela's cells ever grown onto a scale, they'd weigh more than 50 million metric tons, as much as 100 Empire State Buildings. Hela's cells were vital for developing the polio vaccine, uncovered secrets of cancer, viruses, and the atom bomb's effects, helped lead to important advances like in vitro fertilization, cloning, and gene mapping, and have been bought and sold by the billions. Yet Henrietta Lacks remains virtually unknown, buried in an unmarked grave. Now Rebecca Skloot takes us on an extraordinary journey from the coloured ward of Johns Hopkins Hospital in the 1950s to stark white laboratories with freezers full of Hela cells, from Henrietta's small dying hometown of Clover, Virginia, a land of wooden slave quarters, faith healings and voodoo, to East Baltimore today, where her children and grandchildren will live and struggle with the legacy of her cells. Henrietta's family did not learn of her immortality until more than 20 years after her death, when scientists investigating Hela began using her husband and children in research without informed consent. And though the cells have launched a multi-million-dollar industry that sells human biological materials, her family never saw any of the profits. As Rebecca Skloot so brilliantly shows, the story of the Lacks family, past and present, is inextricably connected to the dark history of experimentation on African Americans, the birth of bioethics, and the legal battles of whether to control the stuff we are made of. And so I actually didn't manage to finish this book yet because I had to return it to my library. I don't actually own a copy of it again yet. But I would definitely recommend this if you want to have an insight into how women, and particularly women of colour, have been mistreated sometimes also by maybe particularly the medical science. I don't know, probably also in other fields. Unfortunately, female representation isn't very good in the sciences, but I think people of colour also struggle a lot to be represented, and particularly females of colour. So if you want to know a bit more about that, I would definitely recommend checking that one out. And overall, obviously, I would recommend checking all of these books out because I think they're all fantastic, both in terms of giving you brief glimpses at women's stories, but also if you want to delve deeper, these last two books are really great. And obviously the first one as well, the graphic novel about Ada Lovelace, are really great at giving you a manageable overview of what their lives were like, and of maybe learning a little bit more about how some of the forgotten people in science have actually made really important contributions to where we are in the world of science, technology, maths, medicine, engineering today. Until next time, bye!